Swords are the most used weapons in Minecraft. But when it comes to enchanting them, you gotta do it right and avoid some very common mistakes that most players are still making. So, in this full Minecraft Sword Enchanting guide, we will go over every sword enchantment in the game, and I'm gonna tell you how you can build the ultimate god sword for yourself. Let's go! Okay, so the first two enchantments I want to talk about today are very general, and I think every sword sooner or later should have them. On the one hand, that will be Unbreaking, making it so that your sword lasts longer. In fact, at the maximum of Unbreaking 3, your sword will be able to deal 4 times as many hits as it would usually do before breaking. Very good enchantment and a must on every sword. The second one kinda goes in the same direction, and in my opinion, it's the best enchantment in the entire game, and that would be Mending, which makes it that whenever you gain experience points, they will automatically regenerate the durability of your sword, making it so that you can never ever break it at all. So yeah, obviously, Mending is very good, and ideally, you wanna have that on everything. There's just a teensy tiny problem, and that would be that you can't get it from your enchantment table, because Mending is a treasure enchantment. That means you have to find it somewhere in the world in a treasure chest in the form of an enchanted Mending book. But alternatively, you could also get it while trading with a librarian villager. It's a bit of a hassle to come by, but definitely worth it in the end. And just on the side, if you could maybe leave a quick like for the video, that'd be super nice, because especially for smaller channels like this here, every single like really helps to push the video out to more people. So cheers so much for your support. But now, let's talk about the probably most important part when it comes to swords, and that would be damage. See, when it comes to increasing your sword damage in Minecraft, there are 3 possible enchantments. Those are Sharpness, Smite, as well as Bane of Arthropods. Sharpness increases your damage overall against any type of enemy. Smite is a damage boost that only works against undead enemies, and Bane of Arthropods increases your damage against spiders, silverfish, and endermites. Now, the important thing you need to keep in mind about those 3 is that they are exclusive, meaning if you put one of those on your sword, you can't use the other 2. And that naturally raises the question, which of these 3 should you take? Well, it's actually a bit more tricky than most people think. Let me explain. First of all, Bane of Arthropods in general is not a good enchantment because it is only viable against enemy types that aren't really all that dangerous, leaving us with only Sharpness and Smite. But what I think most players don't know is the damage bonus that you get from Smite is actually higher than the one from Sharpness, and not just by a little bit. Smite is actually much stronger than Sharpness. Here's an example. In Minecraft Java Edition, a diamond sword deals 7 damage at base, and with the maximum of Sharpness 5, that increases the damage to 10. However, with Smite 5, yes, that damage bonus is only against undead enemies then, but you're dealing a whopping 19.5 damage. That is almost twice as much damage per hit as you would get with Sharpness alone. Or in other words, with Sharpness 5, you could never one-hit a zombie or a skeleton, even if you put it on a netherite sword, whereas a netherite sword with Smite 5 can easily one-hit zombies, skeleton, and even withers. But what does that mean for you? Well, to be honest, I think there's nothing wrong with just going for Sharpness. However, in my personal opinion, I think it's viable to have 2 main swords, one with Sharpness and one with Smite, and then switch back and forth depending on which type of enemies you're up against. But okay, yap session over. Now that you know which damage enchantment you want to use, let's talk about the rest, starting out with Knockback, which in my opinion is probably the worst enchantment for swords in the game. See, at first glance, it actually sounds pretty good, right? You push enemies further back, getting them off your tail. And don't get me wrong, in situations where you're overwhelmed by enemy numbers, then Knockback is quite useful. However, there's a big problem with it. A lot of enemies in the game shoot you from a distance, whether that be skeletons or if you're hunting blazes in the nether. Against all these ranged enemies, you want to be up close and personal with them so you can actually fight them, and if you push them further back, you're helping them out and they get more shots off on you. You don't want that. And that's why, in general, I would say rather not use knockback on your sword. However, what you should use on your sword is Fire Aspect. This one's pretty simple. Sets the enemy on fire if you hit them, they burn for 4 seconds and take damage over time, which is, some nice extra damage, doesn't hurt you at all, so there's really no reason not to use it. Only little thing you gotta keep in mind with it is that nether enemies, like for example piglins, they don't burn, so Fire Aspect effectively doesn't do anything against them. Still pretty useful on the overworld though. Up next, we have an enchantment that only exists in Java and not in the Bedrock edition, and that would be Sweeping Edge, which makes it that whenever you hit multiple enemies with the same sword strike, then these secondary hits against those enemies that you didn't directly aim at, those enemies will take significantly more damage. To be more precise, every secondary hit with Sweeping Edge will deal 75% of the damage that the main target got. Another very good enchantment that I would recommend anyone should get is Looting. Looting not only makes it that you get more drops out of the enemy, but what many players don't know is it also increases the chance of getting rare drops from the enemy in the first place, so it's a win-win situation. But before you start building your ultimate god sword, you gotta check out my full enchantment guide right here, because otherwise you might waste a lot of resources doing things in the wrong order. So see you next time, and until then, craft well.